distinguished ladies and gentlemen, students, a very good morning to all of you. It's a pleasure to be here in Goa and the International Center to be talking to you about understanding Pakistan, a subject that's very close to my heart. It's always difficult to talk about Pakistan for two reasons. One, that there are a billion experts in India who will tell you how to deal with Pakistan. And secondly, fair bit gets written about Pakistan in the media. And I'm sure all of you are already aware of a lot and read about it a lot. So it will not be my intention to repeat what you may already have read, what you may already know. Instead, to give you a flavor of Pakistan that you may not have experienced before, and to take you to a journey which is not very frequented or not very popular, but which is very critical in our understanding of this country. So be prepared to be surprised. I have divided my talk into four parts. I'll first give you a brief introduction about myself, where I'm coming from. I will then focus on some of the key issues in understanding Pakistan. I will then talk about two critical political and security issues in understanding of Pakistan. I will then move on to Indo-Pak relations, the Kashmir fixation, and this nebulous thing called the Pakistani mindset. And if we have time, I'll touch a little bit about leadership, Pakistani leadership. My interest in Pakistan began quite early in life, thanks to the stories my father, an Indian Air Force officer, used to tell us about two Pakistan Air Force officers who had been his flight commanders in the Second World War, flying Spitfires and Hurricanes over Burma and later after the war. These two gentlemen later on went to head the Pakistan Air Force, Air Marshal Asghar Khan and Air Marshal Noor Khan. The 1965 and 1971 wars in Pakistan further heightened my interest. In college and university, I studied the freedom struggle in the partition of India, and I was hooked. During my service career, I had the opportunity to serve in Pakistan, and I spent most of my life working on various desks associated with Pakistan. After superannuation, I've read even more on Pakistan than I did while in service. And what I found that most of the attention in India quite naturally gets focused on issues of terrorism, on cross-border infiltration, on LOC firing, stop-go Indo-Pak relations. As a result, the real and serious issues of and in Pakistan tend to get ignored. So what I've done is, while not losing sight of these issues, I've tended to go beyond the headlines, beyond the daily sort of grind, and ask some fundamental questions about Pakistan. Like, why is it such a troubled and troublesome state? Are its problems of recent origin, or are they rooted in its very genesis? Why is it languishing at the bottom of every international comparison? Why is Pakistan frequently called almost like a failed state, in danger of being a failed state? Why is it being threatened to be called a terrorist state? It's answers to questions like these that I find, it's my belief, provide a better understanding and a new perspective on Pakistan. My experience in traveling across India and talking to various audiences on Pakistan is that while, as I said, there are a billion experts, but very few who have really understood and read about what is happening inside Pakistan, which to my mind is very critical in able to formulate policies to deal with Pakistan. And as Sun Tzu in his Art of War very aptly said, know thyself, know thy enemy, 1,000 battles, 1,000 victories. For me, the starting point in understanding Pakistan is that it did not begin on a clean slate in 1947. It carried with it the baggage and the legacy of the Pakistan movement. And three issues were critical here. One, the opportunistic use of religion. Second, the fact that the Muslim League, because it got Pakistan on a platter from the British, did not transform itself into a political party when Pakistan was created. And third, transmitting the quest for parity between the Muslim League and the Congress, between Hindus and Muslims, into a quest for parity in the new state, Pakistan wanting to be treated on par with India. These are the three critical issues of the Pakistan movement, and I'll give you two examples to sustain this. Jinnah had sanctioned the use of religion in the 1945-46 elections because of the areas that he claimed for Pakistan in the West. The Muslim League did not have a presence. You would recall that in the NWFP there was a Congress government. In Punjab there was a coalition government of Hindus, Sikhs and Muslims. It was only in Sindh that the Muslim League had some sort of a presence. The Muslim League had no program of action like land reforms that the Congress did. So the only way Jinnah could gather support for the Muslim League was to sanction the use of religion. But with slogans like Pakistan ka matlab kya in the 45-46 elections, and the answer being the kalma, la ilaha illallah. There was no way that the religious genie could be put back into the bottle once Pakistan was created. Second, Iskandar Mirza, who was the defense secretary then and later on became president, asked Jinnah, who had by then become Governor General, quote, to be considerate to the Muslim leaguers, as after all they gave us Pakistan, unquote. Jinnah, who knew the insignificance of the Muslim League, retorted, quote, who told you the Muslim League gave us Pakistan? I brought Pakistan with my stenographer, unquote. Unlike the Congress, the Muslim League had done no homework on how Pakistan was to be governed. Even the British warned Jinnah and Liaquat Ali that you'll be in for a big shock because you don't know how to govern, unless the Congress party, which had made out its plan of action how India would be governed. And this is precisely what happened. Pakistan continues to contend with the negative consequences of its legacy even till today. The second issue in understanding Pakistan is the question of identity, and this is for two reasons. First, the geographical areas that came to constitute Pakistan in the east and the west had never before existed as a single country. Therefore, it was necessary for the leadership to weld the disparate nationalities into a single unity for Pakistan. And second, the identity had to be different and distinct from that of India. Pakistan had been carved out of India. India was a historical reality. Everybody knew India. Nobody knew what Pakistan was. So you had to create an identity that was distinct from an Indian identity. This need for distinctiveness led to the emphasis of an identity that was Islamic, taking its cue from the two-nation theory. Resultantly, creating a Pakistani identity required erasing any Indianness within Pakistan, and denying the Indianness of Pakistan's identity meant emphasizing the Hinduness of India and reinforcing the Islamic nature of Pakistan. That's why you'll find today, even in articles, in conversations, on TV talk shows, the stress is always Hindu India vis-a-vis Islamic Pakistan. Of late, the trend is to locate Pakistan's identity in the sands of Arabia, and this is reflected in the change in language. Thus, you will find that Khuda Hafiz has become Allah Hafiz, Namaz has become Salat, Ramzan has become Ramadan, and because in Arabic there is no P, Pakistan is becoming Al-Pakistan, and God forbid, the land of the five rivers is soon going to become Punjab rather than Punjab. A Pakistani professor enumerated Pakistan's identity dilemma in these words and beautifully put it. Quote, if we let go of the ideology of Islam, we cannot hold together as a nation by any other means. If the Arabs, the Turks and the Iranians give up Islam, the Arabs will remain Arabs, the Turks will remain Turks, the Iranians will remain Iranians. But what do we remain if we give up Islam? And somebody said, if you give up Islam, you will become second-rate Indians. But the problem with the emphasis of an Islamic identity was that the opportunistic use of Islam was effective in creating a country by raising communal passions, by raising hysteria, but it was not effective glue to keep the country together. This is because the area that constituted Pakistan consisted of historical states with significant linguistic, cultural and ethnic diversities. Here people instinctively thought of themselves as Baloch, Bengalis, Saraikis, Punjabis, Sindhis, rather than as Pakistanis. Wali Khan, a famous Pashtun leader, exemplified this dilemma when he said in the National Assembly, I've been a Pashtun for thousands of years, a Musalman for 1300 and a Pakistani for only 40. That is the kind of dilemma that you have. In fact, Maulana Azad had pointed this out to Jinnah, and that was the reason for his differences with Jinnah, when he said that you are claiming division of territories on the basis of religion has no sanction in Islam or the Quran. You can use it as a political program, but it does not have any sanction in the Quran. The Quran talks about a qawm, which is a composite unit of believers and non-believers. And Jinnah had serious differences with Azad because Azad was demolishing his own thesis of two nations. Not surprisingly, into the 7th decade of its creation, Pakistan has yet not been able to establish an overarching Pakistani identity. As a result, the alienation of different ethnic groups, despite being Muslims, continues to be a persistent phenomenon in Pakistan. East Pakistan broke away because for the Bengalis, language was a far more important point of their identity than religion. The 5th insurgency is happening in Balochistan while there is unrest among the Pashtuns and the Sindhis, despite all of them being Muslims. Given the failure to create a national identity by any other means, Pakistan has resorted to the tactic of raising the threat from India as a cement to bind the multiple identities of Pakistan. The narrative is that India is out to undo partition. While this can hardly be the basis of a sustainable national identity, it has implications for Indo-Pak relations. In fact, as soon as India became the negative reference point for defining Pakistani nationalism, there was no way Pakistan could develop a new and positive identity for itself or develop normal relations with India. It meant that Pakistan would need a Hindu India constantly as an essential reference point for its raison d'etre, and its national identity would continue to be a negative anti-Indian narrative. The third thing in understanding Pakistan is Islamization. Incremental doses of Islamization starting from Jinnah through the Objectives Resolution of 1949 and Zia's Islamization drive have led to intolerance, insecurity and violence, and a situation where different sects of Islam are almost at war with each other and where the persistent killing of Shias is being called genocide. Today, each sect of Islam has its own set of madrasas in different cities and even in different localities of the same city, where primacy is given to arguments to demolish the other sects rather than to teach them about Islam per se. It is this narrow tunnel vision of Islam that is being imbibed by successive generations of Pakistanis. Where have all these incremental doses of Islamization led Pakistan to? I'll give you one gruesome example, but it graphically depicts where Pakistan is at. In January 2016 in District of Hara, which is in Punjab, a 15-year-old boy apparently misheard a question relating to the Holy Prophet and raised his hand. The Maulvi and a section of the congregation pounced on this poor boy and accused him of blasphemy. The boy was so overcome with grief, to atone for his mistake, he chopped off his hand using a photo cutting machine and presented it to the preacher on a platter, and his family cheered him. A prominent English paper, The Nation, noted happily, quote, "If people are ready to hurt themselves in the name of religion, imagine what they will be willing to do to others," unquote. The Daily Times asked ominously, "The sheer savagery of this act compels one to ask, have we really been driven to the edge of insanity in our subservience to the Maulvis and the Mullahs that we now chop off our limbs in order to acquire the status of a believer," unquote. During the last 7 decades, the space and opportunity for Pakistan to be a moderate and inclusive state has shrunk enormously. Religious intolerance, confined to pockets at one stage, is now widespread. The warning signs for the next generation are everywhere. In fact, in the recent election that were held in July, there was a Barelvi hardline party called the Tehreek-e-Labbaik, you may have heard of it, has come into the fore and gathered almost 22 lakh votes, especially in the case of Punjab, which just shows the drift of Pakistan. The fourth issue is of parity. The desire for parity with India, which I mentioned earlier, military, political, and regional parity. This obsessive and fixated search for parity harks back to the history of the subcontinent, believing itself to be the inheritors of a millennia of Islamic rule over the Indian subcontinent, especially of the Mughals. Pakistan feels that the inheritance demands that it be treated at least as an equal, if not superior to India. This quest for parity, rather than being buried with partition, has been carried on into the new state. And parity with India has become a fixation with the leaders, especially with the Pakistan army. It is this quest that makes and defines them as Pakistanis. Without assertion of such parity, they will be seen to have acquiesced to Hindu subjugation. Fifth issue is that of terrorism. While Islamization had a certain salience in a country created on the basis of religion, the growth of jihadi terrorism and violence prevalent in Pakistan today is a result of deliberate state policy. Given the roots of terrorism in Pakistan, it is unlikely that the Pakistan state will ever relent on using terrorist organizations as instruments of state policy. And finally, army and civil military relations. These go to the heart of the issue of governance and democracy in Pakistan. The fact that the army dominates is not disputed, but why it does so is hotly debated. Why the army dominates the polity and the linked issue of why civilian governments have been unable to control the army and implications of the army's domination are the core issues in understanding Pakistan. Let me now give you some long-term perspectives on the political and security situation in Pakistan beyond the recent elections and the coming into power of Imran Khan. The one major political trend that is increasingly becoming visible in Pakistan is reversion to pre-British structures of governance. The pre-British subcontinental empires were characterized in broad terms by two main principles. First, the entire empire was the personal estate of the ruler. The bureaucracy functioned at his whims and fancies. And second, instead of the rule of the law, there was law of the ruler. All power and authority flowed from him, and he was the final authority in all matters. During the martial law periods in Pakistan, the constitution itself was suspended, and the word of the dictator was law. But even under civilian governments, the noticeable feature has been their increasing authoritarian nature. The governance model of Nawaz Sharif during his 3 tenures is a case in point. Not only did he liken himself to a Mughal king, but also behaved like one. He ignored parliament, the real bastion of his strength. His record of attendance of parliament is just under 13%. He rarely consulted his cabinet. The federal cabinet that was supposed to meet at least 52 times a year met only 6 times. And of course, Nawaz considered himself to be above accountability because he had been elected. Thus, arbitrary exercise of power has emerged in Pakistan as a dominant form of governance and replaced institutional and democratic principles. Incidentally, Imran Khan's record of attendance of parliament is even worse than that of Nawaz Sharif. He has never held office, he's untried, he's untested. He's not been part of any parliamentary committee, so he really does not know how parliament functions. It will be extremely interesting to see how he deals with the situation now that he's Prime Minister. On the security side, Pakistan faces several critical security issues, including the situation in Afghanistan in relation to the United States, developments relating to the Financial Action Task Force, increasingly tense situation on the line of control, and so on. The one silver lining is this all-weather friendship with China and the potential that the China-Pakistan economic corridor has in boosting Pakistan's economy. However, viewing the security challenges in a longer-term perspective, I would like to flag 2 of the more critical security challenges for Pakistan: the looming water crisis and Pakistan's demographic profile. Agriculture is critical to Pakistan. 60% of Pakistan's population depends on it. It accounts for 20% of GDP, and 70% of Pakistan's exports depend on agro-based products. Being an arid country, between 90 to 95% of all water, surface and groundwater, is used for irrigation, used in irrigation for agriculture. The problem is that Pakistan today has become a water-scarce country. Its per capita availability has shrunk to 908 cubic meters per capita per annum, from about 5,650 cubic meters per capita per annum in 1951. The country is expected to become absolute water scarce, that is less than 500 cubic meters per capita per annum by 2025. That's about 7 years from now. Absolute water scarcity means drought-like conditions in various parts of the country. Why has this happened? 4 reasons account for it. First, Pakistan is dependent on a single river system, which is the Indus and its tributaries. The peculiarity of the Indus is that 75% of its flows are in the 4 summer months and 25% for the rest of the year. For agriculture, you require 60% of water for the Kharif, which is the summer crop, and 40% for Rabi. This means that you have to store enough water during the surplus months to be used in the water-stressed months. Unfortunately, or for whatever reason, Pakistan has built only 2 major storage facilities, the Tabela and the Mangla, which are inadequate to store the water during the surplus months. As a result, 30 million acre-feet of water flows down the Indus into the sea during the summer months, which is not being used. To put this in perspective, the entire flow of the Chenab river is 27 million acre-feet. So in effect, the entire Chenab, more than the entire Chenab river, is just going waste into the sea because Pakistan is not able to store its water to be used during the Rabi period. Second is the unchecked growth of population. Pakistan's population is growing at 2.4%, which requires additional food, which means additional water to be used. Third, Pakistan's water utilization is among the worst in the world. For example, its water intensity rate, that is the amount of water in cubic meters used per unit of GDP, is the world's highest, which means that Pakistan's economy is more water intensive and more water dependent than any other country in the world. Against the world average of $8.6, Pakistan's 1 cubic meter of water contributes only 34 cents to its GDP. It is also indicative of the inefficiency of water usage, because only 36% of the water from the river reaches the field. 64% of the water gets wasted because the canals are not lined, or due to seepage or whatever other reason. And finally, groundwater depletion. Groundwater, which is akin to family gold, is to be used as the last resort when surface supplies are disrupted. It is also depleting very fast in Pakistan. Satellite data shows that the Indus Basin aquifer is now amongst the most stressed in the world. This means that Pakistan does not have much groundwater in reserve to be used as the river system becomes more stressed. Now, if this is bad news, worse is to follow because of climate change. Already a reduction in the long-term availability of water has been noticed. Practically speaking, this has resulted in the decline in water availability during the Rabi season. And in the last 5 years, for example, and last year especially, the water shortage was between 30 to 40%. For Kharif 2018, which is April to October, there was a 40 to 50% water shortage in Punjab during the sowing phase, which is from 1st April to 10th of June, as a result of which 500,000 acres of land could not be cultivated in Punjab. In Sindh, only 30% of the land had actually been sown this particular year. Now, what this means for food security for a population which is dependent on agriculture, you can well imagine for yourself. Second, given the estimates of population of 220 million in 2025, the gap between availability and demand of water will be about 74 million acre feet. To put this in perspective, 74 million acre feet is 2/3 of the entire flow of the Indus River. Right? In other words, in 7 or 8 years' time, Pakistan is going to have to find another Indus River to feed its population. There is no other Indus River. And this is happening without India storing the waters that we can of the eastern rivers. 3.6 million acre feet of water are still flowing into Pakistan. And Afghanistan has not used waters of the Kabul River, and they can store about 4.7 million acre feet of water. If these two happens with declining supplies, the impact on Pakistan in terms of just pure water will demolish all security parameters in Pakistan. The second major security issue for Pakistan, as I mentioned, is the 2.4% growth of population, coupled with inadequate education and its demographic profile. You've all heard of Malthus and his famous 1798 thesis, an essay on the principle of population, when he looked at population, total population, and predicted the Malthusian catastrophe. Modern day demographers, however, don't look at total population, but they look at age structures based on the principle that working age population consumes less than what it produces, whereas the old and the young consume more than they produce. So any country which has a majority of working age population as compared to the young and the old has the possibility of a demographic dividend. Pakistan's working age population of 15 to 64 crossed 50% in 1990. It's currently estimated to be 60%, and it will peak by 2045 at 68% when it will start aging and declining again. Thus, the once in a lifetime window of opportunity for Pakistan for a demographic dividend is between 1990 and 2045. Of this, 28 years have already passed without any upsurge in economic activity. To actualize the demographic dividend, the critical question is that whether those entering the labour market can be absorbed productively. Pakistan's population suffers from a double whammy. Inadequate education, with almost 50% of children out of primary schools, so they can't climb up the ladder to secondary schools, higher education. And the economy providing only between 600,000 to 1 million jobs annually, whereas 3 million people are entering the labour force year after year and will continue to do so for the next 40 years. So what happens to the almost 2.5 million people who are poorly educated and unemployed? In other words, what happens if the demographic dividend is not realized? The flip side of an unrealized demographic dividend is that the massive youth bulge will pose a serious threat to law and order, including in Pakistan's case of terrorism. The danger for Pakistan is that without sustained economic growth and without investment in education, the demographic dividend would degenerate into a demographic horde with all its attendant consequences of frustration, alienation, violence, and terrorism. It is obvious that Pakistan is faced with hydra-headed problems, increasingly diminishing water supplies, an uneducated horde of young people, an economy on the drip, lack of jobs, and a growing radicalized population. Such a combination poses serious challenges that the army too will have a tough time to control. Nuclear weapons, non-state actors, even Chinese assistance may not help Pakistan to tackling these kind of security issues. There are no shortcuts here. Pakistan will have to make massive investments in water infrastructure, education, and the economy to stay afloat. There are no signs that it is doing so. Let me now turn to Indo-Pak relations. It's obvious that Pakistan poses several challenges to India. What comes to mind immediately are the ceasefire violations on the LOC, policy of leading India and Kashmir and other parts of the country using non-state actors, and so on. These are of course very serious challenges and cannot be taken lightly. But to my mind, these are possibly symptoms of a much larger challenge that Pakistan poses to us. For the last 70 years, every government in India has tried to develop policies to enable us to live as neighbors. Our finest diplomats have spent their careers trying to implement policies laid down by the government. There have been many back-channel meetings, hundreds of track 1.5, track 2, track 3 discussions. All such efforts have only come to naught. Of course, there have been achievements like the Indus Water Treaty, the ceasefire and so on, but by and large on the security side, efforts have come to naught. Today, 7 decades after India was partitioned, we are where we were with Pakistan, even as the world has moved ahead fundamentally. This must compel us to ask a basic question. What is the missing element in our policy formulation and practice that has resulted repeatedly in a 1 step forward and 2 step backwards relationship with Pakistan? Or to put it differently, why haven't we been able to convince Pakistan to behave like a normal state? To me, the reason appears to be that we have a one-dimensional view and approach towards Pakistan, treating it as a normal state, whereas Pakistan is anything but a normal state. We need to develop 2 more dimensions. One, understanding of Pakistan, and the second is to factor in how Pakistan views India, look at India, how Pakistan sees us, and to understand the mindset where Pakistan is coming from. For example, we need to understand if a normal, let alone a positive relationship with India, even fits into Pakistan's ideological and security narrative. Anti-India is how Pakistan defines its identity, as I mentioned earlier. Can we get around this? How do we demolish once and for all Pakistan's pretensions for parity with India? How do we negate Pakistan's fixation for Kashmir? Do we understand the mindset of the Pakistani establishment and its hatred for India? There is thus a critical requirement to go beyond current issues. We need to understand Pakistan's vulnerabilities. I have mentioned 2, water and population. An understanding of a host of issues like this will enable us to formulate much better policies towards Pakistan. The second dimension is, how does Pakistan view India? To my mind, Pakistan's perception of India has 4 components. 2 I've talked about, identity and parity. I'll talk about 2 more. One is Kashmir, and second is the Pakistan mindset. Pakistan's position on Kashmir is frozen in time, without an alternative strategy. Its military strategy to wrest Kashmir by force has repeatedly failed, as in 1947, 1965, 1999. Its quasi-military strategy of using terrorists since 1989 to force India to come to the negotiating table in a weakened position has not been successful either. It has failed to develop any coherent political strategy except to intermittently raise the issue of human rights violations. Being a state sponsor of terrorism, the international community is not listening to Pakistan. The developments pertaining to the Financial Action Task Force are a testimony to this. But despite repeated failures, Pakistan will not relent on Kashmir. And why is that? I think Zulfikar Ali Bhutto in 1969 gave the best explanation of this in his book, The Myth of Independence. And he made 3 points. First, India wants Jammu and Kashmir because she wants to negate the 2-nation theory, the basis of Pakistan. Second, if a Muslim majority area can remain a part of India, the raison d'etre of Pakistan collapses. Third, therefore, Pakistan has to continue unremittingly a struggle for the rights of self-determination of the Kashmiris. And any rights, I quote, it would be fatal if in sheer exhaustion or out of intimidation, Pakistan would abandon the struggle, and a bad compromise would be tantamount to abandonment, which might in turn lead to the collapse of Pakistan. Though the Pakistan Army hanged Bhutto, his articulation of Pakistan's relentless quest for Kashmir has been followed assiduously by all subsequent rulers, civil and military. Thank you for your patience. I'll take questions.